Okay, afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We will first off a couple of announcements. Remember, semester test 1 is on the 3rd of September. That's Thursday morning, 20 to 10. So you still got a couple of weeks before that. I've had questions about whether it's going to be an online or written test. We're going to take the assumption it's an online test until instructed differently, and whether we're coming back to campus or not on level 2, I don't know. That also will be information will be handed to us as need be. We'll keep you informed as much as possible. Who of you have noticed there's a bonus mark for practical 5? Well, no one actually seen that on the mark sheet. Okay. Yeah, 10 marks. Can we get the past paper for semester test 1? Sure, you can do the memo, send it to me. I don't hand out past paper, the memos. Wait, the past paper's on Eve already. It's on Eve already. It's been on there since the beginning of the semester. I won't hand out solutions. You can do it and then send it to me, and I can look at it. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, please, if you have questions about code, don't DM me directly on Discord, as I tend to have a habit of deleting my DMs once a week. So if I haven't responded to you, I can't access the message again. Rather, if you have questions of code, email Mr. van der Westhuizen and myself included and ask the question. Don't just DM me and expect an answer. How do we get the bonus marks? Getting back to that. Currently, you always assume that whenever we work with arrays, that all the arrays are the same size. So the bonus mark will be if each course can have a different number of subjects. Again, I'll explain that. My prac has me marked. Okay, before I get to that, again, the bonus will be if you're able to design your project in a way that each course can have a different number of subjects. Hope that's clear. My practical has not been marked yet. Ladies and gentlemen, please keep in mind that a lot of the assistants have been load shedded like you, and a lot of students were load shedded over the weekend, are still being load shedded. The assistants have until Wednesday to mark practicals. So give them until Wednesday. If they haven't been marked by Wednesday, then let us know. But all assistants have until Wednesday to mark a practical due to load shedding and data restrictions. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, with the practical sessions, we're noticing a problem with people attending and also wasting of data from the assistant side. If you want feedback on a Friday afternoon, please make sure you're on Discord within the first 15 to 20 minutes. If you're not on Discord in the first 15 to 20 minutes, we assume that you're not going to come on and get feedback. So once the assistants have marked for that session, they're going to disconnect to save their data as well. Remember, they are unlimited data as well, like most of us. So I can't expect my assistants to stick online for 6 hours and not talk to anyone or have no one to actually give feedback to. So the rule, we'll put it on notice on Eve as well, stating it. If you're not online within the first 15 to 20 minutes, we'll give you 20 to get online and to get feedback. After that, the assistants will mark and then come back on during session 2 for the session 2 students. So please note, if you want online or live feedback, you must be online in the first 15 to 20 minutes and let the assistant know you are online. If you do not let them know you're online, they'll not assume that they'll assume you're not there and mark the practical nonetheless, as long as the design and UML is all uploaded. On a final announcement, hopefully, I'm going to try and attempt to remove session 3, as there is no students actually coming for feedback for session 3. So I'm integrating session 3 students into session 1 and 2. If any student in session 3 has an issue with this, please let me know before Thursday, as on Thursday I'm going to integrate you guys into session 1 and 2. As I don't see the need for an assistant again to come to sit online for 6 hours or 6 sessions and no one there for feedback. So we're trying to reduce the amount of data usage from the assistant side and more effectively run the practicals online. So again, first 15 to 20 minutes, you must be online if you want online feedback. If you don't want feedback, that's your choice. We're not forcing you to be online. We'll mark the practicals nonetheless, as long as the design is there. But we need to clearly see the design and we need to see the code. And again, if you're in session 3 and you don't want to be moved out of session 3, I need a valid reason for it. Okay, because computer science doesn't really have sessions. We don't choose sessions again, no. I'll just distribute session 3 students into session 1 and 2. I'll keep them with the same assistant, but I'll just distribute them within the sessions, or I'll move them around as need be. Some will get new assistants, some won't. But session 3 students will be adjusted slightly into session 1 and session 2 as there's now space. Lejon, if you have no access to Eve, that means you're not registered for the course. So if you have a friend that's not able to access Eve or access Blackboard, that means they're not registered. Tell them to contact me if they're meant to be on the list or have access, because we will need to sort that matter out. And I think the last announcement will be the semester test is on the 3rd of September in the morning at 22:10. I'll post the details on Eve as well. The scope will be everything up until end of next week. Okay, most likely. What we're doing today is the last lecture on composition. We'll do composition in the tutorial tomorrow as well, but this will be the last formal lecture on composition, as it is not something you guys are unfamiliar with. It's something that you're used to in terms of last semester. I'm going to show you a few more things, and then from Wednesday on, we're going to start inheritance. So we can start getting that section, because inheritance takes a bit longer to explain and work through compared to composition. Okay, today again, composition and orphan objects. As I saw, some of you were making orphan objects on Friday's practical by mistake, so we're going to discuss that. First off, as normal with every start of a new lecture, we have Did You Know? Before I switch into the slide for Did You Know, any idea where the term debugging comes from? Let's see what you guys think before I show you the actual slide. The term debugging. Any idea where that came from? Fixing errors in code, correct. That's what it means. But where did it come from? Any ideas? You just Googled the damn thing, yeah. Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, insect and all. You guys are quick to Google, fantastic. Okay, yes, the term bug, first time it was used, I think it was a moth. Okay. The first time a bug was used in terms of computer science was by Admiral Grace Hopper, and she found an actual moth stuck in the computer which caused the program to break. If you can see the slide there with that is the actual bug. They stuck to the piece of paper in the report saying this is what caused the problem. So yeah, the term debugging was because of an actual bug stuck in the computer. And you got a nice PhD comic of dealing with debugging. I think most of us deal with it like that most weeks. Okay, so we've got debugging and testing. Debugging is done while writing code. Testing is done often done after the code and done by a different group of people. So you have your debuggers and your testers being two different groups generally. But again, IT isn't the most infamous for naming. We aren't creative. We name it as it is. So debugging, because we had to take the bug out of the system, we debugged it. Okay, but the first bug was an actual bug. Mr. van der Westhuizen did some research, and the term bug in manufacturing always has referred to initially was referred to from a physical bug in the system as well. So its naming is quite straightforward. It's a bug in the first terms. The bugs we deal with nowadays are slightly different. Thankfully, we don't have moths breaking our computers. Okay, so that's the general knowledge for this lecture, at least, the debugging. And again, I was surprised to see that Admiral Grace Hopper was the one that was the first one to note it in IT. if we understand the history on it correctly. She was the first one to make note of a bug in computer science, at least. Okay, so one thing we picked up from Friday's Practical, a lot of you had extra parameter or extra instance variables that you didn't really need. Okay, so apparently bugs are still affecting us nowadays. As one of the students said in chat, fixed the laptop once, there was an actual bug in the fan. That is a bit insane. That a bug actually got in the fan, but never mind. Okay, with your classes, ladies and gentlemen, we need to talk about something that a lot of you are mixing up. Stored data versus derived data or obtained data. What I noticed on Friday when marking, a lot of the assistants also noticed it, is you had extra parameters or extra, not parameters, let me not use parameters, extra instance variables that you didn't need. Like if you look at the top corner here, I've got the instance variables I needed for Practical 4, name, class, test, assignment, assessment 1, assessment 2. Some of you made assessment 1 and assessment 2 an array, which is perfectly fine. That was an issue. But a lot of you suddenly added PCM, semester mark, and comment. Those aren't instance variables. PCM, the practical component mark, the semester mark, and the comment, that's not information that is given to us by the user. That's not information we use to calculate something. That's stuff we derive. So the term derived data refers to us taking the information we have, like the class test, the assignments, the assessment 1, assessment 2, and calculating something. This is the derived data, which generally don't get instance variables. They are just functions. So I have a public function, PCM. I have a public function, SM. This calculates the semester mark for me every single time. So I don't need to store the semester mark value and the PCM value as an instance variable. They are derived data that I pull from the data that I know already. So be careful with that. Don't throw all, just make everything instance variables. Don't make 100 instance variables you're never going to use. Only make use of instance variables that are needed. If you can calculate it, it's a derived data. It doesn't need an instance variable. So anything that is calculated belongs in the form? No. These are actually part of the class. You're very careful with the calculations. Is the calculation about a specific class or is it not? If it is about a specific class, it's still in the class. So the PCM and the SM are in the class public class subject. These are part of the class, same class. In the form, I'll just say for subjects.pcm, subjects.sm, and call the functionality. I'll also have the function determine exam entrance or determine comment in the class. Anytime we have calculations in the form is when we're doing calculation on the subjects as a group. So if it's calculation on a specific subject, it's in the class. If I'm saying, find me the subject with the highest fail rate, or find me the subject with the highest pass rate, that's then in the class, the form. The form can deal with an array of subjects. The form can deal with an array of certain information. If it's about a specific subject, it's in the subject class. Just be careful of that. But again, we'll go into more detail on tomorrow's tutorial to try expand on that specific point, because I know some of you are struggling with where to put functions and where not to put functions in subroutines. Okay, but the idea is if you can calculate it, you don't need to store it as an instance variable. We'll go into instance variables a bit more in depth now as well when we move into usage of instance variables as well. Everyone okay the difference between stored and derived data? Okay. Again, you guys are welcomed, those watching the recording, to put comments in Discord and in the correct channel, and we'll respond to you on the correct channel. Or you can put comments in YouTube and I'll respond to you there as well. Okay, so let's move on. Why instance variables? Now let's look at, here we have a example of a constructor that is instantiating, when it instantiates, it's given a name of a specific object. So we have 3 waiters we're hiring, and when the waiter is, okay, let me solve the questions first, and I'll go into data. So the stored data is just the instance variables, yes. Is it okay to use subroutines instead of functions in class calculations? Yes, but depends on what you're using it. So if the user inputs and as part of the object belongs to the class. So if it's a user input and as part of the object that belongs to the class. If I understand the question correctly, yes. Yes, it needs to be stored. Okay, let's move back on to instance variables that we're looking at now. Specifically, we're looking at the instance variable of name. So we're going to instantiate 3 objects. In the constructor, it accepts the name of each waiter. So here we create Huey, Dewey, and Louis, or Lewis. The problem is we realize that Lewis is named incorrectly. So we go and write this. We say waiter3.name equals Louis. So we edit waiter3 to become Louis. So we have Huey, Dewey, and Louis. Now, this is fine. This is correct. We're working with the same object. So we're still working with object 3. We change that object's name to Louis, and it's fine. So instance variables allow us to work with information being stored. Okay, so we can change instance variables after the constructor has been gone through as well. Remember, if the constructor sets a value and it's a normal property method, we can change the information. If it's a read-only property method, once it's created, we can't change it. So keep that in mind as well. But in this case, it's a normal property method. We can change it, and it doesn't really affect it. So attributes are referred to instance variables when each instance of an object maintains its own version of attributes. Remember, we have object Huey, we have object Dewey, and we have object Louis. Each will have their own set of attributes or instance variables that belong to their specific object. And you got to keep that in mind. Each object has its own version of the data, except for something that is shared. If it's shared, all 3 of them will have the same piece of information. Okay, but this is normal for normal instance variables. But have a look at this example here. Look at line number 9. What is line number 9 doing? What is the difference between this and the previous section? What is line number 9 doing? It's creating a new object. Good, good. That is creating a new object. Repeating the keyword new, that's correct, but it's also creating the object. So what happens to the object Lewis? Remember, here we create an object 3. We say new waiter, Lewis. And then we say, oh crap, we made a mistake. Now we're getting interesting comments. It gets destroyed, it gets overwritten. It's overwritten, it becomes changed. Instantiates a new Lewis, remaining Lewis object whilst creating a object. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the reason we're doing this is I saw people doing this mistake for practical 4, and this is a dangerous situation because what happens is we create Huey, we create Dewey, we create Lewis, then we go and create Louis. Now, do you see that each time we have our array, we have a pointer to the specific object, pointer to the specific object, pointer to the specific object. The second we run the last line of code, the pointer shifts to the new object. What happens to this object, Lewis? Okay, as Mr. Beck says, or Ms. Beck, I'm not sure, it is not deleted. It's not cancelled. It becomes an orphaned object. Okay, it becomes an orphaned object. There's no reference to it anymore, so it still exists in memory for a short while. Okay, so it's important to understand that when you instantiate an object, you create a new object. So in this case, we had object 3, we instantiated Lewis, we had Lewis, then we made a mistake and we instantiated Louis. Then we created the reference to the Louis object, but the Lewis object still exists. Okay, but it doesn't have a reference anymore. And this is where a garbage collector and other things start to exist. Okay, so objects that no longer have a reference is considered orphan. It still exists in memory, but you can't get to them anymore. This is the problem. You can't access it anymore. Those that are doing computer science will know about a pointer. The pointer is disconnected. That means we can't go back and say delete it. Okay, so Visual Basic has a memory management system that tries to clean up the resources of the computer. One is a garbage collector and the other is a deconstructor. A garbage collector will run through all the objects that don't have connections anymore and destroys them. It deconstructs them and deletes them. They do consume memory until the garbage collector runs. Okay. VB underlines unused variables, but this is something else. An orphaned object isn't an unused variable. It is a used variable that's lost its reference. It was a used variable, but it's lost its reference. So it's important to understand, before the garbage collector was properly designed and established in VB, we would have to manually control the garbage collection process. We would have to manually run it. We'd have to manually destroy connections. So we're going to look at how to actually. Okay, there also is like a constructor. There's a deconstructor inside VB that is designed to destroy an object, to delete an object, to remove it from memory. So it's important to keep that in mind. There is a deconstructor. So if we look at this approach now, we have waiter 3, we set it to nothing first. Then we create Louis. So what the nothing does is literally destroys the connection to this. It tells the computer that yes, you can run the garbage collector, the reference is no longer there. We create the new object Louis, and we run the garbage collector by going gc.collection, and this invokes the garbage collector to go through all the objects and check which still has a reference. Since we've destroyed the reference link by saying it's nothing, the garbage collector can then come and pick it up. Nothing is a keyword. Nothing is a keyword. If you look at other languages, it's referred to as a null. So your null pointer exception, I don't know why, but in VB that's to determine it as nothing. So other languages, you use the word null. Okay, I needed to go through orphan object because I saw you guys were making mistakes like that with Practical 4. If nothing keyword is not used, what will happen? Not much. It'll still run in the garbage collector, but it'll see that there's no connection. The nothing is there to ensure that the connection is severed correctly, but there's still, when we did this, the connection is still severed to a certain degree, and the garbage collector should be able to go and clean up the extra object, the orphaned object, and remove it from memory. If there's any trace connection, the garbage collector cannot remove it from memory. Hold on. So we should use this to remove an object that is read-only and cannot be changed. No. This is this is when we want to replace an object almost. Okay. Because we have, in this case, we have our 3 objects, and we are made a mistake with 1 object. So we want to replace the object that's been considered. But to make sure it's correctly handled and removed from memory, we set it to nothing and allow the garbage collector to run. So does this happen to our array size, array 0? Not really. As long as an array exists, it is still valid. So what happens if line 8 is swapped by line 11? I'm assuming you're talking about this slide. 8 is 11. I'm not sure. Okay, let me just finish up with the questions and we'll get back to the lectures. If you just correct the mistake on line number 7, yes, you can. Legend, remember, I'm going to show you things that you're going to use later on. It not means you're always going to use it. It's good to understand that there's a garbage collector system in VB. It's important to understand what happens to objects when they are no longer used. You need to know what happens to them. You need to know that when the garbage collector runs, it invokes the deconstructor, which then deletes the object and removes it from memory. Before this garbage collector was in place, the developer would have to manually make sure that the memory was deallocated and returned back to the system for usage. If the developer didn't do that, they would get a stack overflow, or not a stack overflow, but a memory leak, and which could cause major problems in the computer. So it's important to keep in mind conserving and correctly managing your objects. A garbage collector will run on a periodical instances, so you don't have to call it. It'll run by itself. Every once in a while, it'll just get invoked by the .NET framework to go and clean up the memory to make sure we don't have a memory leak. So the garbage collector isn't needed to be called. It's just there's an example to show you that it can be called. But it's more important to understand what happens when we orphan an object, or when an object loses its reference, what happens to it. Okay, some of these questions I only can answer tomorrow. Do we have to call the GC every time after using nothing? No, we don't have to call the garbage collector every single time. Like I say, it does run by itself on set instances or set time frames inside the system. So that's not an issue. The idea is to understand that like the constructor, there's a deconstructor. It's referred to as a finalize method. And then allows us to destroy or erase an object. Method is not right or become orphan. If you use the set property method, does it overwrite or become orphan? If you use the property method like we do here, if you go with this example here, this will overwrite the name to become Louis. It will not create an orphan object because we're not creating a new object. The reason I'm talking about it is I saw some of you by mistake were creating a new subject with so many assignments, and then directly under that creating a new subject with so many class tests. So you were creating orphan objects in Practical 4, which is a concern. So I decided to include the topic of orphan objects in today so you understand what you were doing. For those who did that mistake on last week's Practical, that creating objects, you need to manage your objects correctly. You need to actually think about when you create the object, are you creating it correctly and does it have the right information? So keep that in mind when you create your objects. It's not just a matter of, yay, create objects as needed. There's memory management you have to keep in mind. You can't create an infinite amount of objects and just assume the computer will keep up with you. If we use the nothing, then the entire object becomes null pointer with nothing inside it, right? No, not technically. When we invoke the nothing, like we do here on line number 9, it sets the reference to nothing. The object still exists in memory, but there is no connection anymore, which means the garbage collector can come and erase it from memory. Okay, what happens is the garbage collector tests the objects. Does the object still have a reference somewhere? If the object still is referenced somewhere, it cannot collect it from memory. So if it's got a connection, you've left a connection by mistake somewhere, it may still exist in memory and take up space. So we make sure we get rid of it by setting it to nothing. Can we use a loop for resizing waiters array maybe? So what does a star mean? Okay, I'm confused by your questions. Oh, it removes the pointer, yes. So can a loop be used when resizing the weight array maybe? Yes. Yeah, I know. I just remember I did remember C++ for a second. Okay. But the main idea with this set of slides is you understand the idea of a garbage collector and orphan objects. Is everyone okay with what an orphan object is? Remember, an orphan object is something when a connection is lost or a connection is removed from a specific object. I'm mixing up my terms today. So you have an array or a single object, and you create a new object. The original object will lose its reference. Therefore, it has to be collected by the garbage collector. And it's important to understand why it happens. Every time you run the constructor, you build a new object. Regardless of what was there, you create a new object. So it's important to only create what is needed and then work with that. But thankfully, Visual Studio has a built-in garbage collector that'll run on not a set framework, but certain instances it'll run and collect information. You can invoke the garbage collector, but that's up to you. Okay, it's not something you have to do. Now let's look at composition again today. As I mentioned, I'm hopefully wanting to finish off composition for this week, for the semester. We'll cover it again later on, but the idea of composition the theory side will be finished. We'll cover it in the tutorial, and then, but on Wednesday we'll move into inheritance, which is the next part of OOP. So here is an example of a plane, and it's composed of cockpit, gallery, seats, and toilet. Okay, so that's the UML representation again. Remember, the plane is made up of a cockpit, seats, gallery, and toilet. So the diamond is connected to the plane. Just remember that for this week's practical as well, since you have to do the UML with composition. We have our properties, our constructor, our methods, our instance variables. Remember, most of these instance variables are now of another object. So here's the property method for seats. This is nothing really new. What we're going to look at is the constructor. There's different ways to use the constructor. Okay, and that's what we're going to look at now, is when we're dealing with composition, we have to build each part. Okay, if we have the plane, but we don't make the seats, is it usable? So we build a lovely plane, it's perfectly built, no issues, but there are no seats. Is it usable? Huh? How the hell is it usable? Usable, not very friendly. Car, okay, yes, maybe a cargo carrier. Let's specify a passenger plane. Are you going to stand for 14 hours? Okay, let's be specific. A passenger plane. Sit on the floor. Okay. So everyone agrees we have to make the seats, correct? Handles on the roof. Okay, good. So we're looking at how to make the seats. So we have our property method for seats. That doesn't mean we made the object for seats. So we have the first example of a constructor. Here we resize the seats and automatically make the seat objects. Okay, this is one way of doing it. There are many other ways, and this just depends on what information we have and what information we need to have. So the problem is I never can give you guys a definite solution, and I think you're going to get used to this. With programming, there is not only one way to solve any problem. There's always more than one way. So we're going to show you different techniques and see how you apply them. We test your logic, we test your ideas behind it, and that's the more important side. So this is one way. We redum the array and automatically go and make the seats. But these objects have nothing in them, so we then have to go through all the property methods. So here is an example of cockpit, and the constructor has seat number. In my case, I do seat location. We're going to get to that now. In this situation, the constructor for a seat requires information. So we can't create it in the normal method. We can resize the array in the constructor, yes, but we cannot go and make the seats because the seats now need extra information. So each seat has a location, okay? A location in the plane. A1, A2, B2, C3, whatever you want to call it, it's their location. So when doing that, we look at this type of approach to building the object. Now, this is done in the form, yes. We create the plane. We have some number of planes, number of seats. We ask the user how many planes, how many seats. We resize the plane array. We create the plane object for each plane, and we give it the number of seats. But when it comes to the seats, we start looking at it differently. We can't go in the constructor. Are we creating the seat objects here? Have a look at the code we're seeing now. Are we creating the seat object? No. Okay, we're not creating a seat object. We're just resizing the array. Because to create the seat object, we need to know the location. Why is that important? Okay, I don't know how many of you have been on a plane before, especially a plane that's destination isn't local. You got your first class, your first class, your business class, and then your economy. If you've seen the first class seats, they look like beds. Okay, they're a very different type of seat, but that we'll get into later on. Right now, let's focus on location, where the seat is going. So for each seat, we need to know its location. So when you create the seat, it needs its location. It just can't be said, okay, new seat. It needs additional information. Okay, so what happens is we create our plane with the array of seats, no objects. We then go loop through each seat, asking for location. We create a temporary object, pass in the seat for location, so we have temp seat, and we pass this object into the array. This is not orphaning objects. This is not losing objects. We are simply connecting the objects to the array. So as we loop through, we go from seat 1, we initialize it. Seat 2, we initialize. Seat 3, we initialize. Seat 4, 5, as we go on. So each time we loop through this, we ask for the location, we create the object for that seat, and we then put it inside the array. And we keep looping through it until we've done all the seats. So in this way, we're creating the object for seat in the form, not in the class, because we need additional information. Okay, so it depends on how you're going to create it. If you're restricted to saying, yes, I need the location, then we have to do this. Why don't we say, you could do that. Okay, the line was there. Why don't we just say planes p.seat c equals seat new location, new seat? You can type that. I just chose to do it this way. The next question I see is, so does this mean that you make a mistake, seats n-1 orphan? No, there's no all classes here. Okay, so this class plane, we have to have the same. So in this case, all the planes will have the same number of seats, correct? Okay, if you think of like a Boeing 747 or Boeing 743, they have a fixed number of seats always. All the planes of the same category have the same number of seats. But if you go for the local planes, which I don't know what the code for the local planes that do local destinations, those are a different class of planes. Those have just uncomfortable seats all the way through. Okay. But is everyone okay with the idea of composition? Do we need to declare the seat class in the form? This is in the form. The section of code you're seeing right now is in the form. We're creating the object seat, but it's being stored inside the object plane. Keep that in mind. It's not stored in, there's no array of seats in the class. All we're doing is creating the objects in the form and passing it to the plane object. Okay, so we're moving the information from the form into the plane. If we have a different number of seats, how do we do that? That's the bonus for practical 5, so you can try that at home. I'm not going to show you that. It's actually easy. Some of you have done it. It's a lot easier than you think, but it's the bonus for practical 5, so that's something you guys can work on. Again, the bonus for Prac 5 is having each course having the potential to have different number of subjects. That's the 10 bonus marks. Okay. Again, tomorrow's tutorial will be based on composition, ladies and gentlemen, but that will round off our work on composition for this semester in terms of introducing theory for composition. What we're going to focus on from Wednesday is inheritance. And that is one of the more important sections to look at in terms of remember, inheritance is one of the 4 principles of object-oriented programming, so it's an important one to consider. So we're going to spend a bit more time on inheritance than we have on composition, purely because composition is something you guys have done before in Informatics 1A. It's just we're giving it the correct term. Instead of a record inside a record, it's a composition. So it's not something you haven't seen before, it's just a new terminology to use, or the correct terminology to use. So hopefully everyone's okay with the idea of what composition is. Can I get thumbs up, yes, no in chat? Okay. And again, if are you unsure of composition, tomorrow's tutorial will be on it. You can ask questions in the Discord as well. We'll answer that. Just the last, I just want to repeat the instruction or the announcements at the beginning of the lecture. Please, if you're going to have questions about code, don't just DM myself and Mr. Investation, rather email us, because I deleted one of the messages from a student and now I can't find it. So rather email is an easier way for us to track and get back the information. So if you did DM me over the weekend, email us rather, because there's no way I can answer you now. If you're not in a practical session in the first 15 to 20 minutes on live and inform your assistant, the assistant will assume you're not going to be there for live feedback, mark you nonetheless, and then will disconnect and reconnect at the next session to save their data as well, because it's a bit unfair on the assistant side to sit for an hour and a half using their data and no one comes for feedback. So we're going to adjust that. For session 3, I'm going to move students from session 3 out of session 3 into session 1 and 2, as we've noticed that no one comes for feedback in session 3. So again, it's unfair on the parts of the assistants to wait till session 3 and no one ever comes for feedback. So we're adjusting that. And then I've told you the bonus is each course can have a different number of subjects. If you've done it already, fantastic, 10 bonus marks. If you haven't done it, you can try it. But yeah, that's up to you. It's bonus marks. It's not, you not have to. Each part has its own class. Correct, Mr. Oliver. That's correct. Each part. Remember, a cockpit can exist without the plane. A seat can exist without a plane. A toilet can exist without a plane. A plane, however, cannot exist without the seat, the cockpit, the gallery, the toilet. So the plane can't exist without the others, but the others can exist without the plane. And that's one of the key things to keep in mind. It has the has-a relationship. But again, a lot of this will be again in tomorrow's tutorial. Any other questions or comments, please throw them into chat. But this will be the last theory lecture on composition, at least. I can't think of anything else I need to announce. Again, semester test is on the 3rd of September. What is the built-in functions we should not use in okay. What are the built-in functions we are not supposed to use in Practical 5? That's another matter altogether. Ms. van der Vesthuizen has already commented all of them. Lejon, we don't want you guys using the built-in functions like array.average and array max and that type of stuff. That you must code yourself. So unless we've explicitly said you could use a built-in function like array.length, which is not a function, it's a property, don't use it. So can you please post last Thursday's tutorial on trends? I will do that. I just need to update the slides a little bit, and I'll update it. But the video is already on EU and it's on Blackboard and YouTube already, so you can watch it there. But I'll upload the slides. I just need to update the slides first, and then I'll put them on. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now. If you have any questions, you can still ask. I'll be on for a few more minutes. For those watching the recording, have a good day, and see you in the next lecture.